so important to wake up and you know exactly what you need to do that day. You can't run your day on the fly.
I think whatever you're doing, especially in construction, you got to find your why.
I'll be remembered for helping people or speaking up about things I've gone through and encouraging people to speak up.
Words are powerful. I think that you can really change your environment and your mindset by being conscious of the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Welcome, you're listening to Constructing Mindsets. I'm your host, Vincent Saunders. This is the podcast that shines a good light on the construction industry. Whether you're on the tools, in the office, or supporting others behind the scenes, we are hearing from the people who are making this a better place to work and how they are doing it. Please consider subscribing or sharing this story. Thanks for joining us on this one. Let's get into the episode. Tonight, I'm talking to Charlotte McRae, the Director, Recruitment Specialist at The Placement Co. Yeah, how's your week been?
Yeah, not too bad. Actually, took a week off last week, which was nice. Went away with the family, and look, just didn't even have the phone switched on, which was nice. And to be honest, I think even if it was switched on, there wouldn't have been a great deal happening. As we know, the market isn't as buoyant as we would like it to be. But no, things are starting to move and show positive signs.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably like, I don't know, that was like one of the questions that kind of was first, that when we first maybe started talking about this, it was like, what's happening with the market, or when are there going to be some jobs? But no, I think we'll probably get to that hopefully maybe a little bit later on, or just in your opinion, I guess, where things are at and how things are looking.
Sure, no, absolutely. No, the week has started positively. So I guess it's a little bit different, in terms of the way we look at, at how a week goes and how we think it might be going. But I would typically, base it around how many candidates I've got out interviewing. That's how I know, whether things are going well or not. So there's a couple of candidates out interviewing at the moment, which is good. When you don't have any candidates out interviewing, in my world, that means that you're not going to make any money. So, it's like if there's no projects on, you're not going to make any money. So no, there's a couple of things happening, and definitely for the first time in a really long time, I've seen more inquiry coming from clients, which, people are starting to strategically think about the future, which is something that in New Zealand construction we don't do very well. No one really plans for the future. We're very reactive. And look, I do it with some clients that are very good at thinking, right, okay, like what does the future look like, and what does that mean we need? But there aren't many.
All right, so hit rewind for a little bit. So I see, just looking through sort of your work history there on LinkedIn prior to chatting to you, really started in sort of real estate. I see there for a bit. Like, sort of, how did you first get started in construction recruitment, and what drew you to the industry when you made that transition?
So I was working in real estate, and I worked in, say, pre-management / real estate in the UK first. And then when I left the UK, obviously traveling around for a little bit, went to Australia. And I've always, when I've gone to a recruitment company for a job interview to try and get a new job, they've always tried to hire me. So it's been like I've gone for the interview, and then they've called me up and said, oh, we think you could actually be quite good at recruitment. Like, have you ever thought about doing that? So it must be my calling in life, because that's what's happened every time I've gone to one. So yeah, when I went to Australia, ended up working I did like a mining shutdown desk for the construction industry, for the mining industry. And that was just, I was really supporting like a senior consultant alongside another, like more, support person, and we were just so busy. It was when the mining boom was on. I was in Perth, and we were just placing these shutdown teams of like 60 guys who were like riggers and crane operators, and they called them like TAs, which were like trade assistants. And there was just so many people that had to go in and do the shutdown for the mining, for the mine. And so then they would go and do that for a week, and then they'd be pulled out and taken to another one for a week. And so that was a pretty busy a busy time there. And then when I moved to New Zealand, I really wanted to get back into property side of things. And obviously over here, it's got to get a license, and it's 7 days a week, and it's really, real estate is a lifestyle. I would describe it as, it's not really a job. It's a lifestyle. So you either choose to sort of really go 100% or 150% all in, and you are available 24/7, or you don't really do that well at it in the beginning, so you've really got to just give it your all. Same with recruitment, do you know what I mean? But at least recruitment is just Monday to Friday. So anyway, went into the real estate world again here for a few years, and I really enjoyed it, but I got to the point where I didn't want to work 7 days a week. And I sort of was thinking about the future and thinking, oh, like if I kind of want to, have a life outside of work, and I want to have a child and a family and things like that, this probably isn't going to be conducive to doing that. So I went to a recruitment company, and they tried to hire me. And they had this opportunity. It was a new business, and they sort of said, you can do a real estate desk, or they call it a desk, or you can do a construction desk. So we don't have any existing clients. You would be starting the desk from scratch. And my husband is a builder. And so we'd obviously talked at the time, we weren't married, but we'd talked about construction, and I kind of was quite interested in what he was doing. And I thought, oh, I think I prefer to meet people from the construction world than real estate agents all day, every day, trying to place them. And so, yeah, I just decided to start the construction desk. And so, I was 24 at the time or something like that, and knew absolutely nothing. I kind of, when I first started, I had no guidance or anything around anything. And so it was a big, big steep learning curve, and obviously I'm still learning now, but I know a lot more than I did then.
Cool. And what were your first impressions of the construction industry? Was it what you expected when you first started?
When I first started, I would say it was very different to what it is now. And there's a few things in that. I think that it was very, and it still is, obviously very male dominated, but and there's clients that I still work with now that I worked with back then, and have built that relationship, who would say that they would never take on female project managers, for example. And now they're like, we need a female. We need a female. We need a female. I'd say I'm probably quite an old head on young shoulders, I think I've been described as. And so I'm probably a bit old school, but I do think that the industry when I started was extremely old school, and it's getting there in terms of where it needs to be, but we're a long way off having that sort of equality.
Yeah. And walk me through a typical day for you now. Like,
The placement co was born after I had my daughter. And I guess, so just to give context, we were in lockdown. So for majority of my maternity leave, I was in lockdown. And I guess, it was just an overnight thing, really, that I decided to do that. And look, I definitely don't regret it. It's a typical day. It's hard to kind of give you a typical day at the moment, because at the moment it's not as busy as we need it to be. But, I try and set aside days. So say, for example, I'm working on a retained assignment. The most recent retained assignment that I worked on was the structural engineer for the St. James's Theatre restoration project. And so when, we're working on a retained assignment like that, where the client has retained me to find the person, so they pay us to run a search, and then we bring them, a short list of candidates that we've already done all our due diligence on, and that they should meet. And so, a typical day would obviously be resourcing for candidates. So using all the different tools that we use, LinkedIn, our network, and talking to candidates, trying to obviously understand if they're suitable. And then from there, organising to meet with them once we've discussed the role and their interest over the phone. And of course, then we would set aside days for candidate interviews. And then from there, obviously, in and around that, there's meeting with new clients, meeting with existing clients. But there's a lot of, once you've kind of done all the grunt work. There's then the administration of obviously putting profiles together, doing references, making sure that, everything is as it should be, and to then go and present those shortlists to clients. So a lot of the time it's on the phone or having coffee with potential clients or candidates. And then, there's a lot in the mind that kind of ticks over, and you'll be talking to someone, you go, oh my God, that person, like I got a call a wee while ago from a tier one contractor, and they needed a civil project manager for the airport. And I had spoken to this guy like 4 years ago. And because I don't work in the civil space, I was kind of like, I may at some point be able to help him, but I'll just keep in touch. But I sort of said, look, I may not be the best person to help you. But when that role came in, I was like, I know the person, and it's like sometimes 4 years can go by or longer than that. And you're like, I actually, and that's where the network comes in, and the memory. You've got to have a good memory in this game.
I'm based in Tauranga and you're based in Auckland. I find difficult maybe is, and it might be different from a recruitment space, is sometimes some of the companies that I've spoken to, I just don't hear back from them. And I don't know if that's a New Zealand thing, or is it just a construction thing, or is it, I hate to say it, just maybe a male thing that they just don't loop back. And I find sometimes even if I do get a message to say, you weren't successful, just the feedback is maybe lacking there. I don't know if sort of what your opinion is on that. I don't.
As well, people may not know that I'm from the UK if they've never spoken to me before, but now you do. So I'm from the UK, and I think, when I moved here, one of the major things that I noticed between, and you've worked at the UK, so you'll be able to talk to this as well, but I think we're quite straightforward in the UK, and so very black and white. We're not sort of afraid to give someone the bad news, whereas in New Zealand, I do feel that we find it really difficult to deliver bad news. And so, that can be in any scenario, whether it's something to do with a project that might be a problem and there needs to be a solution found. I feel that people leave it until it gets to the point where it's even worse before they bring it up. And it's the same with interview feedback, even from my perspective, when I'm working with a client, and I'm trying to get that feedback for a candidate, and it really drags on sometimes, which, is embarrassing for me because I'm trying to be, keep them up to date and communicate as best as I can. And I guess I can only do so much if I'm not getting that feedback. So I do really drive for feedback and constructive feedback, but I do feel that a lot of the time, there can be excuses like, oh, they were just too senior, or we went with someone that was more in line with what we wanted to pay, or, typically those are the sort of feedback pieces that we get, but, there's more to it. I know that. And sometimes I'll get the honest truth. And then obviously I have to decide how I'm going to deliver that. And because for me, I think, and I say this in my website, it's all about the good, the bad, and the ugly too. You can't have one without the other all the time, So just because you get bad feedback, that's not the end of the world. It's something to work on. And that's why as well, when I do references on people, I never leave out I won't say bad parts, but if there's room for improvement, no one's perfect. Do you know what I mean? And that feedback, even in a reference, gives the potential new manager something to work with. Like, okay, this is where the gaps are in their skill set, or they could do this a little bit better. Maybe they weren't given the opportunity to do that here, but going forward, if they had the support, they'd probably be all right. Well, I'm not going to just leave that out because that's really key information for the next manager to help them and help them succeed. So yeah, I do know what you mean. The feedback does lack. And I think, I'm not sure what point in time you're talking about, but especially over the last 12 to 18 months, there would have just been so many applicants for jobs. That depending on whether you've applied directly to businesses or to internal recruitment teams, I think that they would be overwhelmed with the numbers. And it's no excuse, to not get back to people, but I do feel that the numbers would have been extremely hard to deal with.
Like you said, if you do get back with feedback, it kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, it kind of closes the door or closes that chapter, and you can kind of make sense of it and you can move on.
Yeah.
Whereas if there is no feedback or there is no kind of loop back, you're kind of just left wondering why, and that could just, and it kind of always just fester in the back of your mind. Even if you go to apply for the next job, you're like, well, I don't know if I did anything right or wrong in the interview because I never actually got any feedback in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's key, when like for me, working with a candidate, to really get to know that person and how they would be in an interview. So that's why I always interview the candidates that I represent, because I could sit down with someone and they might not be able to make eye contact, or they could be sweating, but you're not going to know that unless you meet someone, and then you can work with that. So like, I have been in situations where I've met candidates and they've not been able to make eye contact, and I've been able to then coach them on that, so that when they do go and sit down with, let's say, a director who's older than me and scarier than me, who's going to expect that person looks them in the eye when they're talking to them, they're going to be able to do that because I've told them to do it. But if I never met them, we wouldn't have been able to get to that point. Yeah, it's there's lots that goes in behind the scenes to make sure that everything happens how it should.
Just interview feedback and like, is there one, I know it's probably not one trick that helps, but one tip or main tips that do come back to you from interview feedback, like around people being interviewed, and sort of what are those work-ons?
I mean, it definitely would depend on the level of the role, what type of role someone was going for. But I'll give you, one example, so you can sort of get candidates where they kind of already think they know everything. So I'll interview them and they'll be selling themselves, which of course you need to do, but they don't need to learn anything more. And these candidates may be intermediate level, only been in the industry for a few years. And I guess they'd be the ones that probably came into the market when it was really humming along, and so probably got overinflated salaries and potentially titles at that time for where they actually sit in terms of skills and experience. So then going forward, if they were, let's say, made redundant when things started to get hard, because, that's what businesses do. They look at who they've got and they go, okay, well, that guy we took on or that girl we took on, we actually took on when we were really busy and we needed a bum on a seat, and they're actually not really up to where they sort of said they were in the interview. Okay, so then going forward, they're trying to get another job at the same salary level and the same type of role, but they're not quite ready for that. And so it's kind of coaching them on, when you go into an interview, you really need to be still saying that you're open and ready to learn and that you want to learn. And some people do and some people don't. If they don't, then obviously, you can't. You're not going to tell someone to BS themselves through the interview and then act completely differently on the other side, but that's not going to be any good for anyone. But if someone sort of just has, I guess, got to that point where they think that they've hit the ceiling and there's nothing more to learn, I guess it's about sort of going, well, no, there is, like, everyone's still learning. And they told me that they'd hit the glass ceiling in the previous role, and that's why they're looking for a new job, and it's kind of like, you've only done 3 or 4 years, or 4 or 5 years even, and you haven't even scratched the surface, mate. So that's kind of sometimes the feedback. It can really be that there are just more better candidates in the market than it could be that they've just been pipped to the post by, someone who was as good and maybe cheaper. I don't know. You know what I mean? It could be a multitude of different things, but the biggest thing is that there are more candidates in the market than there ever has been. Well, in my time anyway, which, has been over the last sort of nearly 10 years. This is the worst it's been. Yeah. In terms of that way. Because it's either there's loads of jobs and no candidates, or loads of candidates, no jobs. But this particular period has gone on with lots of candidates, no jobs for a lot longer than we'd hoped.
Just talking about the market and kind of briefly talked on it earlier, like, yeah, sort of what are you seeing sort of from this year, hopefully into next year? Is the job market kind of expanding at the moment, or is it still kind of in its little small bubble, or kind of, yeah, what are you kind of seeing out there at the moment?
I suppose, obviously, from my perspective, I don't cover the entire construction market. So I'm very niche in that my specialism and my client base are within the vertical build and interiors sector. I work with main contractors, developers, and consultancies. A very small number as well, not everyone. So most of my clients would be main contractors who I feel are probably right now have been hit the hardest. Yeah, the conversations that I have though are wider than that. So, talking to architects, talking to the, like I say, the consultant firms, and architects are starting to get busier, which is good, but it's a flow on effect, and that takes time. So there are pockets of opportunity. You'll see you'll see on LinkedIn, some of the tier 1s and 2s have secured decent projects. Some of them haven't, so there's still redundancies happening. And what we did see for quite some time was, and you would have noticed this in your space, but tier 2s playing in the tier 3 market. So, typically your tier 3s would price the same type of projects from certain value to certain value. But now the tier 2s, because there's no bigger stuff around, are pricing that work too. And they just can't compete because the margins are smaller, and the tier 3s are missing out on the work that they would normally get. So there's been pain points for some time. And I think it's not going to correct itself overnight. The OCR obviously makes a bit of a difference, and hopefully with the recent cut, and hopefully the next one will be of the same ilk, that will then bring interest rates back to probably a making sense level for people to start spending money again and actually getting some projects underway. Because the conversations that I'm having are that there are projects there, but they're just not happening because of things like, say, for example, it's an industrial style project where there's office space. Well, that office space needs to be leased to make sense for it to be built. And the properties aren't being leased. So they're going, well, we're not going to build it. We can afford to build it, but if no one's going to lease it afterwards, we're not going to hold on to it. Do you know what I mean? So, there's issues like that too.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's stuff there, but not quite there yet. Like no one's really, it's like right on the tip of your tongue type thing, but it's no one's really pulling the trigger to jump in and get going, and probably coming into the end of the year, and that it might not, probably not much is going to happen coming into Christmas as it usually doesn't in New Zealand. Everything shuts for a couple of weeks, and then maybe hopefully again next year it starts to pick up a bit more with some of those bigger contracts or bigger things actually getting the button pushed and moving forward into, either design or consenting or building. You did sort of touch on, you talk to tier 1 contractors, architects and consultants. Does sort of jobs flow through that sector in a way, or is it purely just kind of, do they come from the architects first, or then the consultants, and then the main contractor sort of picks up the roles, or does it just kind of all come to you sort of, one after the other type thing, or is there a bit of a flow to it when the jobs do start coming on?
Talking to architects and understanding that they're starting to get busy means that from there, then the consultants will start to get busy, and the consultants are the ones that then select the contractor. So my clients are the contractor, or most of my clients are the main contractor. So we're kind of waiting for that trickle on effect for them to then get selected and then be, whether it's design and build, obviously there'd be a period of time that they'd be in design, or whether it's, they get given the design and it's ready to go as a project boots on ground. So and that obviously differs across the varying types of construction and depending on what it is and who the client is, whether it's government, whether it's private, corporate, lots of different avenues there as well. So we could go on all day. But for me, typically the roles that I get first in the cycle it would start with quantity surveyors, which is what I'm seeing now to start come through. So when the contractors are tendering for work, of course, they need quantity surveyors. Then once they've won the work, they need the site managers and the project managers to deliver it. So we're in the phase of quantity surveyors at the moment. And then once they've, depending on the tier, so for tier 1 contractor, tier 1 project, once they've secured that work, they're then looking for, your site engineers, your services engineers, health and safety. Depending on the size of the project, you could need a whole new team for that specific project, depending on the rest of the workload that they've got on. So yeah, it's definitely the QSs come first and the rest, the delivery team follows, So yeah.
So I think that's I don't know, that's a pretty good segue there, Charlotte. I think, like, obviously in the industry, it's a bit of a tough time at the moment. So yeah, sort of how do you keep positive, or how do you keep going in this, sort of where the market's at the moment? You sort of said you sort of struggled there for 12 months. So sort of what do you do to keep your mindset sort of positive and move through some of those challenges?
Yep. I mean, anyone that follows me or is connected with me on LinkedIn will see that I'm a bit of a runner. So I just started running after I had my little girl. So she's 4 now, but I sort of started like, can't really get to the gym. It's easier to just sort of step out the door and go for a run. So I just was, doing like 5K here and 5K there. And then I signed up to a 10K. So I did that. I think that was in 2022. And then just kind of went back to running just round my area, and then and last year in November I did the Queenstown half. So that was cool, had something to focus on outside of work and train for. And then this year I did the Race Tekapo, which is in Lake Tekapo, and that was 32K trail run. So yeah, I think for me, like, the running has definitely been something to keep me busy when I've not been as busy, but also keep me fit. And I really enjoy it. I'm not just running because I hate it. I just like being outside. And I actually went for a run on a treadmill the other day for the first time, and I thought, oh my God, like, this is awful. I definitely couldn't do that. The getting outdoors and just being, we're so lucky in New Zealand with the weather. Like, obviously the last couple of days, not so much, but we typically, like, even the whole winter, I trained for the Race Tekapo, and I think I only had to do like 2 runs in the rain through winter, so pretty good.
It's like coming from the UK, that's like basically summer, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, for me, I'm like, oh, this is great. It's not cold and it's not wet. It's not grey most of the time. So no, I think getting outdoors and just moving your body. But, if you're not so fortunate to be able to run, just go for a walk. Go for a walk, get outside. I know this, like, so cliche, but it actually works. And I eat pretty well. One thing that I definitely have noticed in the last couple of years, because I guess obviously once you start training for these runs, you do start thinking about your nutrition a bit more as well, because you can literally eat whatever you want when you run as far as that. Like, you could eat McDonald's for every meal and you'd be fine. But I think you get a bit more serious about it and you go, oh, okay, like, yeah, how does that, I think I've just had time to think, how does that actually make me feel when I eat that? And definitely just eating like real food, like things that don't come out of packets has made a massive difference too. And again, I understand that not everyone can, afford to eat all the freshest produce, but just things that, aren't processed.
Yeah, I enjoy running quite a bit, and I've actually been sick for like nearly 2 months. Like, I've got 2 boys, 2 young boys, and yeah, I've been through it. It's been like the worst sickness I've had. So I was going to do a 10K in like a month's time, but kind of have to pull the pin on that and just try and focus on getting better. It was like the flu. It was like, then I had like some sort of strep throat. Then I had some nasal thing, and it just doesn't seem to, like, I'm like 95% there, but then tomorrow I'll wake up and not feel as good. But anyway, but I think keeping moving is just doing something rather than nothing, I think, has been, and you kind of can just build on that, and you can progress a lot quicker than rather doing like one massive run on the weekend and then nothing through the week.
Totally. And like, I've obviously, as I said earlier, got my little one as well, and I just try and get it out of the way before before she wakes up. So I go to the gym as well and do strength training, and I just go really early, and like, I don't want to get out of bed, but I do. And then you never regret doing a workout or a run or a walk, but you do regret not doing it. So
You regret it for like the whole day. You'd be staring
yeah,
outside and you'd be like, oh, it's such a nice day. I wish
and
I
I
went for a
should have
run
gone,
or work.
like I
Yeah.
should have done that. But if you do it, you never regret it. That's the good thing about exercise. You never regret doing it.
It's funny you said that thing about the treadmill because at the moment we are currently building a shed to move all of our stuff out of our garage to
Yeah,
hopefully put a treadmill in because
yeah,
we live like a little bit in the countryside just out of Tauranga City. And like when it gets dark, it gets very dark. There's not street lamps and stuff like that. That's one thing I miss about living in Auckland. You can just pop out and
yeah,
go run anywhere really. That's one thing I
yeah,
do miss about living in a
yeah,
city.
yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully with the lighter nights and the lighter mornings, it will get a bit easier. But yeah, I don't run in the dark. I don't go running on my own in the dark. I'm pretty central. Don't live in the city, but not far from, and I wouldn't run in the dark as a female on my own.
Yep. No, fair enough. What's the time frame on maybe a client coming to you with a role that they have, placing somebody in the role?
Yeah, so I mean, most of my work that I do or try mostly to do is exclusive and retained. And depending on the role and what the client's looking for, we'll set a time frame. So, if it's a really senior role and quite niche, like the St. James's Theatre role, which was extremely niche, was the most niche role I've ever worked on. And there'd be maybe 10 candidates in the whole of New Zealand with the credentials for that. So that was very daunting, taking that on and giving that time frame. But we would look at it over like a 6-week period where we would go, okay, so we'll spend, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks really mapping the market, understanding who's out there, what all the viable options are going to be. And over that time, we're obviously interviewing the candidates, doing the references. And then it looks, say, for example, we came across someone that was like desperate to make the move and they needed to make a decision quicker, then of course things can change. But we typically would set a time frame and go, okay, we'll bring you the long list on this date where we'll present the candidates that we found from that search. And then from there, obviously, we'd set dates for interview, first and second interviews. So it typically can be in that scenario, it could be a 6-week process. If it's a contingent piece, so if, for example, a client just rings up and says, "Hey, look, we're looking for a project manager, and if you come across someone, how long's a piece of string?" types it. Then if we had the person straight away, it could be a case of a week. Do you know what I mean? If they really need that person and they want to get them in for interview straight away, it could be a first interview one week, second interview the next week, and then offer. So yeah, it just depends. It depends on the type of role and the urgency as well. But if it's a proper search, 4 to 6 weeks.
If it's like a proper search or a very specific search like that St. James Theatre, would you be looking offshore as well, or would that be determined by the client at the time? Would they say we're only looking for someone in New Zealand, or we're open to people
Yeah.
offshore or moving them in?
Yeah. So my experience of offshore talent in New Zealand differs depending on who you talk to. So I feel there is a major, people typically want New Zealand experience. And I totally understand that in some circumstances where you really need to have relationships with subcontractors, consultants, different people like the council and all those things that help the project move along. I completely get that. But, when you're doing a project that we've maybe never done in New Zealand before, they're quite happy to bring in these people from overseas because of course we need that expertise and that makes sense too. But yeah, it would really depend on the client. So if the client said, look, we would really like someone out of Abu Dhabi or we'd really like someone out of Dubai who's done this similar type project, then of course we would go offshore. But just let me tell you, whether we say on the advert that we're looking for offshore talent or not, they apply. So even if we're not looking for offshore talent, we typically get a few that will try and apply for the job, which is good. People still want to come to New Zealand, even though people are leaving New Zealand more than ever. We do still have some that would like to come and live here, which is nice.
Another segue, but yeah, you mentioned you lived in Perth there for a while and you came to New Zealand, like a little bit different to what's going on at the moment, where basically most people in New Zealand are going over to Australia. Why'd you come to New Zealand? Which country's better? Because you're a neutral party, you're from the UK, so you can
Yeah.
decide.
Yeah. So look, for me, Perth, I was so young and I'd moved from Perth to Sydney before I moved to New Zealand, and it was really I was on a visa. I was getting to the end of that visa, and I sort of had to make a decision: was I going to go apply for another year in Australia, or did I want to go home to the UK, or did I want to try somewhere else? And there was a friend that was living in Queenstown. It was a pretty easy decision. And then when I got here, I feel like in Australia, nothing ever really felt like it was forever, if that makes sense. And so it just didn't, I wouldn't say it felt like home. Whereas when I moved to New Zealand, it definitely felt a lot more, I say it was a lot more like the UK, but better, and obviously better weather, and the opportunities for work that I landed here were better than what they were in Australia. So
Okay, that's a very diplomatic answer.
I personally wouldn't move back to Australia.
How do you sort of keep grounded or keep that momentum moving forward with your business?
So I've toyed with the idea over the last 12 months, with the market being the way that it's been, to start a different sector, start working in a different sector that is maybe more busy, whether that be civil or, something a little bit different. Do I go and start speaking to subcontractors, or, like you would have to start from scratch, building a different desk. And lots of recruiters will definitely have done that. When you work for a company that's paying you a salary and you're not billing, there's pressure on your back, and you will be getting told to deliver numbers. The KPIs in recruitment would be, you need to speak to a certain amount of decision makers a day. You need to make sure that you're getting a certain amount of CVs out the door each day, and you need to be booking interviews. So you can imagine the method behind that madness when there's no jobs in your specific space. What a lot of recruiters will be doing right now is literally getting CVs and firing them out and hoping for the best, that something comes back and they can get an interview booked in for their numbers, because they've got someone telling them they have to hit those numbers, otherwise they're going to lose their job. So I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I don't have anyone telling me to do that, and there's method behind the madness. So I would prefer not to send any CVs than to send CVs to a black hole of abyss there's no job there at the end of it. Do you know what I mean? So I guess how I move would be speaking to clients and, helping them to understand what the future looks like, what parts of their business do they need to focus on? If they are going to hire someone, which part of the business is going to be the most important spot for them to hire someone in? And then just really working through that with them. And like sometimes the conversations that I have with clients can go on for 6 to 12 months before we start recruiting a role. But it's all that pays off in the end, So yeah, look, it's not for the faint-hearted, this job. When it's not going well, it can be pretty soul destroying. So yeah, and I think that's one of the things that probably you don't get told when you go for an interview for a recruitment job. You get told, oh, you'll be able to make all this money and it'll be really fun, and it's a great culture and we all do this and that together, and but how you actually get there, that's not really laid out. And yeah, when things get tough, you can imagine someone's being paid a salary, but they're not making any money for the business. It's not going to last very long.
Do you have any mindset practices or routines that you use to handle the ups and downs in recruitment?
Probably not the best at that. But one thing that I do is I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think some of them are really lighthearted, and they just literally to like be in the background while I'm doing whatever I'm doing. But some of the ones that I listen to are about business. Some of the ones are about recruitment, and things that you can sort of focus on. Because I think what happens when you get to a certain point in your career, and it doesn't matter whether it's recruitment or project management or quantity surveying, and you can become really complacent. You think that you have got it down pat, and that, just being there is enough, but you forget the ones and what you actually did to get to where you are. And the pieces in the puzzle all have to be done still for your role to be successful. And I think some of us sort of sometimes, especially, when you do get to that point, and also when you've been used to things going really well, you've done the grunt work, you've got to the point where like it's coming the other way, people are calling you and not you're having to call them. Then when the market goes like this and you're like, okay, the phone's not ringing. So I've got to start making those calls again. And it can be a little bit daunting, you can, I don't know what it is. I think as well, when you've built a reputation and you don't want to damage that, you feel like everything that you do is much more important, and what you say and how you present yourself. Whereas when you're in the early stages of your career, whether that's, quantity surveying, project management, whatever it is, you'll just do whatever because you're like, I've just got to get ahead and I'll do whatever it takes. But, I'll make that call, or I'll make the mistakes. But then when you get to a certain point, you're like, oh, I can't really make those mistakes anymore because then it'll look bad, I'm not junior now. So yeah, there's a bit of like, what's it called? Imposter syndrome, probably.
No, fair enough.
But yeah, I'd love to know your tips around mindset. That would be,
I think for me, just staying positive, to be honest. Like it's so, again, like you said, it's kind of cliche, but I find construction sometimes you can kind of get weighed down in a lot of problems or a lot of things that maybe aren't going to plan.
yeah,
And I think for me, one of my key things is just trying to find the positive in any solution.
yeah,
It sounds very strange, but yeah, that you can always find a positive way through, even if it's asking a different question in a different way or looking at a scenario slightly different, taking a step back, like going to lunch and then dealing with the problem. That's helped me a few times.
yeah,
Like if it's not a super urgent problem, just taking a break, taking 5 minutes, driving my car around the block or whatever, walking around the block,
yeah,
coming back and you've just got a fresh mind. Again, listening to a podcast to take you away to a completely different place.
yes,
I think, getting away from it in daily situations can help. And then, just trying to stay positive through any problem that pops up for me. I think that's probably my key ones, I think.
yeah, yeah. I saw something the other week that kind of helped me, and it was like, when you are having like a negative thought or something bad is happening, if you give it the power to obviously continue, like if you continue thinking about it, then of course it's going to make you feel worse. But if you change that narrative and think about something else, no matter what it is, you know what I mean, you're not giving it the energy to take you. And tomorrow's always going to be a new day. And if if you don't get something sorted today, you've got tomorrow to sort it out. It's not life or death most of the time. I have to remind my husband as well, like, he's the same because he's a project manager, and, some of the things that weigh him down, I'm like, it's not the be all and end all of your life if this doesn't happen today. But then I see it, even here in my own home, that it's really hard. It's really hard to not think about it when you care and when you actually want to do a good job, and you know that it is going to be a problem. It's hard to not let it get you down, but it's you got to remember that you work to live, you don't live to work.
Yeah, it's a good one. And like even just switching off, or like I find, like I've always sort of driven to work and then you go to the office. You don't really work from home in the construction or project management space, I think. And I think that time in the car, sort of going to and from work, is kind of my time to either turn on to work and then turn off to work at the end of the day. And like also I find writing things down at the end of the day, like if I've got my things to do during the day, I've got, emails to get through, phone calls to make, but then you've got your obviously task, you need to close out and you need to close things off at the end of the day. If you don't get to one of those things, I find just writing it down either for tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, and then you know that you're going to come to it eventually. If it's not super urgent, just writing it and you have a process that you're going to get to it.
Yeah, no,
I find that helps kind of me switch off as well at the end of the day.
Yeah, you sort of empty your head. It's on the paper. It's not in my head. Don't need to think about it now because I've written it down and I can come back to that.
Yeah, exactly. Ask you positive moments. I don't know if there's one positive moment you could share.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots of positive moments, which is which is also good. Do you know what I mean? I think I'd be still doing this if if it was mostly negative, but no, it's mostly positive. But I think just what I really enjoy is helping people who might not normally get that role if it wasn't for being in the right place at the right time, or for me just thinking, no, I think that they would be really good and pushing really hard for that person to get in front of the client. Because my biggest thing is that you don't hire a CV, you hire a person. So, if you're just seeing someone's CV and they haven't ever worked in New Zealand before, but you've not met the person, how can you make a decision whether you want to hire them or not? So I think one of the most heartwarming placements that I've made is actually a quantity surveyor. He came directly from Abu Dhabi. He's Sri Lankan, and he's just absolutely lovely. Great experience. He was sort of that kind of intermediate level when he started to look for a job in New Zealand, and fortunately he joined a really, really good company, and he's still with them now. He's been there for a couple of years. And every Christmas he rings me up and he asks me if I want to catch up, and he brings me a gift, which he just does not have to do. And I keep telling him, you do not have to get me a gift. It's just ones like that where that they're actually thankful for what you've done to help them. And I just just loyal people who really want to do a good job and actually do a good job and do what they say they're going to do.
Nice. All right. Well, a couple quick fire questions, and then we'll just do a looking ahead wrap up. So quick fire rounds. Are you a coffee or a tea drinker?
Coffee. I used to be tea in the UK, but not since I moved here.
Yeah, I was gonna say Didn't want to say There's definitely a lot more coffee in. I think my first ever cup of tea was like when I actually went and worked in the UK, which is a bit strange. When I was like,
I know,
I was like
it's
26 years old.
everyone wants to be making cups of tea in the UK. They're
Yeah.
obsessed.
It's like part of it is part of the job in the UK.
Yeah.
You gotta make a cup of tea.
Definitely.
All right. Biggest mindset tip for recruiters or job seekers in the construction industry.
Mindset tip. Okay. I think be honest about your ability. Be open to constructive criticism and feedback when you can get it, and just never stop wanting to learn.
One word to describe a great team member or crew that you've met, either in your business or in the construction industry. Word.
I just think glass half full people are the best people, ones that just don't complain all the time.
Okay, great. Favorite way to unwind at the end of a long day?
Well, I mean, the job never ends when you're a parent, as you know, so it's kind of on one job onto the next. But favorite way to unwind would just be, I guess, spend time just, with my husband, and probably watch something on TV. Pretty boring, really, these days since I had a child.
Me and my wife always joke about, we're like, oh my gosh, what did we used to do when we worked like without kids? And we're like, we used to come home, we used to be so tired. And then when you've actually got kids and you're actually doing like a podcast and a full-time job, then you're tired. But we're like, what did we used to do with our time?
Well, we used to actually go out,
Yeah.
before we had the handbrake. We used to go out for dinner, but not much of that these days.
No, funny. And what's one thing you wish more people understood about working in construction?
I think from my perspective would be the sheer pressure on the owners of main contracting businesses. I don't think everyone understands the pressure and the risk that those people take when they take on those projects. I think that I think there's a lot of entitled, people who sort of don't really understand what goes into getting the work and how much stress, those people have on their shoulders.
That's a good, I think that's really good. Yeah. One of the last ones, if you could change one thing in construction to make it a better place to work for everyone, what would that be?
I would get every single business focusing on learning and development of their people.
Nice.
Yeah. There's a major gap.
Thanks so much for coming on.
That's okay.
Again,
It's been fun.
Charlotte McRae from The Placement Co. Where can people find or connect with you if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so yeah, LinkedIn, definitely. Feel free to connect. I post some gobbledygook from time to time and share my insights on there. Of course, yeah, if you, I'm happy for you to put my contact details in the caption or however it works. But yeah, I won't read them out to you now. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best one. Charlotte McRae on LinkedIn. Yeah.
No, awesome. So much for coming on.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Constructing Mindsets. Remember, every conversation is a chance to shift the culture of construction. Subscriptions and reviews are always appreciated. Until next time, let's keep building the kind of industry we all want to be a part of.